Hi everyone, another day, another share with Phyllis Moody, and that's me from Moody Quilting. Alright, so the last video we started working on this block. It's called a Jacob's Ladder. We drafted it, and we made our templates. So this tutorial, we're going to continue working on this block. And we are going to, I'm just going to leave my drafting paper here because I like a solid surface, and my ironing board surface is not that solid. So we've started cutting out our pieces, and I have a few already pre-cut. I have some triangles here that are lined up and marked, and then this is another triangle, and then these are the half square triangles. I've got this ready to go. I have marked some of my whites, and I have some of the blues done and marked. So I need one, two, let me just move all this out of the way. So for the teals, I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I believe I need to have 2 more marked. So I take my template piece and I will butt it up to the one I just marked, and I will take my lead marking tool and I will just draw carefully. Don't go at it straight on like this. Do it at an angle so you don't grab the threads in the fabric and distort your fabric. Alright, so there we are. So that one's marked. I'm going to do one more because we have 2, I believe I have to have 2 done. And then you just mark. And that's it. So those are done. Now I'm going to get a nice pair of scissors out, and we're going to cut these out, and then I'm going to show you how you would mark your actual seam line. Don't forget, what I just marked is a cutting line. So we're going to just carefully cut on the actual line that I just marked, making sure that I don't distort the fabric or cut off. Take your time doing this. There's no rush. There's no race to finish, okay? You do it at your pace. It's got to be relaxing and enjoyable, and if it's not, then you're just rushing a little too much. You can take your time. So there's one. I'm going to cut out another one. There we go, and one more, and then I have all my teals cut. I believe I need one more white, but I'll mark that. I want to show you how I mark the inside lines, but before I do that, I also want to get 2 more off-white backgrounds for the triangles and get them marked also. Alright, so that's my waist. I'm just going to put this aside. That can be worked into another block. And these 3 are ready to be marked. The other thing that needs to be marked is some triangles. So this is the fabric for the triangles. I'm just going to give this a quick little iron. There we go. Nice and flat. I'll just put that there. And now we're going to take our triangle and we're going to mark this triangle. Again, hold your pencil on its side because you don't want to grab the threads inside the fabric, because then you're just going to pull the fabric around and you're not going to mark and you're going to have it distorted. Okay, so that one's done. I believe I need 2 of these, so I'm going to go ahead and mark the other one. Now I line, because I'm trying to save some fabric here, so I line up, and also it saves a little time, because then this way I'm only doing 2 markings. So there's my 2 triangles. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to carefully cut on that line again. I'm just going to cut off all the excess around and then cut down that center line, and I have my 2 triangles. Seam allowance included because we added the seam allowance to our template. Now some people, when they make their templates, they make it to size, mark the sewing line, and then eyeball the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Both ways are fine. You can do both ways if you want. I just do it this way. I don't know why. I think it's more like because that's how I was taught, and the bigger the pieces are, the more clumsier you can feel. Just be really careful. I love these K. Butley scissors because they have a little bit of a, there's an edge here that grabs and holds the fabric in place so it doesn't get away from you. And I really like these scissors for cutting precisely. It really makes a difference. So like I said, and the handles are like big, your thumb doesn't get stuck in the smaller one. They're really comfy. She's got different sizes. And there, those are ready for marking. So now I'm going to show you, this is the right side, this is the wrong side. These fabrics here are really hard to tell which side is right or wrong. It's a woven fabric, so it's really hard. I do need to make one more square out of this one, but I'll do that off camera. But in the meantime, I want to show you how I mark these. Where's my marking tool? I had it here. Oh, here it is. So I use something called a 1/4 inch. You could use the 1/4 inch line on this, but I just use the 1/4 inch on this. So there's a little ledge here. I put it onto the cut line of the fabric, and then I hold it down, and I take my pencil and I just at an angle mark it, making sure that the fabric doesn't move. That's why I'm using something that has a bit of a matte finish. Some people use a very fine sandpaper that you can buy at the hardware store. They're great too. I just find something with a little bit of matte, and you don't press hard, you gently mark, and just at an angle, you hold your pencil at an angle and you do a couple of markings. And there we are. And there you are. Okay, so let's do one of these. Same thing. Once everything is marked, I have a tendency to put all the pieces laid out in the pattern layout, and I can't technically do that. So let's say I finished marking this one. I'll put these dark here, peach here, and then this would be the background. I would take my pieces and literally lay them out in the teal here, teal here with right sides up, teal here, and then background and background. And I would lay out my whole block, because when you sew these, you want to pick these up like this, so you know that you're sewing in the right direction, and then you're going to line these up, and then this is what you're going to do. I'm going to take this one here, I'm going to leave these marked out so you see, and of course I would have all my pieces marked out. So I have a thread here, and I have these two pieces. I put a knot in the bottom of that, but now I need to pin. I want to make sure that my my marking lines are lined up. Now I use these tiny little applique needles. I love them because they're tiny and they stay out of the way. Now see, this is not lined up properly, so I'm going to take this piece, and right where the crosshairs of the markings I did for my seams or for my stitching lines, I'm going to put the pin right in there. Then I'm going to come over here and do the same thing with the crosshairs. I'm going to put it right in the where they cross over each other, the two lines that I marked for my sewing lines. And then I'm going to go over to the other side and do the same thing. Oh, that's it. And line this up. And then I'm going to put one in the center. Now you're noticing that this peach is a little bit bigger. It's gotten stretched a little bit, I think. Because this, don't forget, this is on the bias, so it's probably gotten stretched a little bit. So I'm going to line this up, leaving some of the fullness. Oh, there goes my yarn. And I keep moving the fabric up and down till I get the needle going in on the line on this side and coming out on the line on that side. Once I've done that, I know that that line's going to line up. So now I'm going to start at one end. Okay, so I'm going to hold this. And make sure that that fabric doesn't move from itself. I'm going to pull this little pin out, put it in my little pin cushion on my finger, and I'm going to go back with my sewing needle right in the hole where I just pulled the pin out, and I'm going to do a small stitch, and then I'm going to do another stitch, back stitching, and one more. Now some people do something else. This is how I was taught, so I always do it this way. I don't find a little knot at the end of my, and doing some back stitches affects the seam allowance. And then I'm just going to go and sew tiny little stitches. And I use a thimble, and I hold the needle with the thimble and then my finger. So I put the thimble there and then my fingers holding it. And then this way I can hold the needle in place. It doesn't move on me. Okay, that's going to do just fine. And I'm sewing on the line on both sides because I made sure it lines up. And if it goes off a little bit, like, there's some give and take. We want it exactly as perfect as we can. Now I'm folding this fabric onto the needle. I'm not pushing the needle in. I'm holding the needle, making sure that as I fold, it doesn't get pushed out, pushed back, because I have my thimble on the back of the needle, and I just fold with a little bit of a push with the thimble, and I keep sewing. Now your stitches aren't going to be as small as mine. You can't see them because they're really, it's light thread. Maybe the next one I'll do a dark series of for the next block, I'll use darker thread. So here we go. And see, all that fullness has kind of disappeared. Oops. And I have one finger underneath, and I am actually poking that finger, so once I feel the poke, I know I can fold it back down. You'll get calluses, you might bleed, but that's okay. Okay, pull out the needle and put it, and we're halfway there. Now I hold the fabric in my hand. I hold it this way. I don't sew this way. I want all this fabric in my hand so I can hold it in place and I can control the fabric better. Now I'm actually using the table to make it easier. I have my hand here so it doesn't move, and I am just carefully folding the fabric on. So these are little tips that I have. See, as I come to the end, I'm trying to control all this fabric here so it doesn't get, so I don't get things distorted on the seam. You'll find a method that works really good for you and your hands. I've been doing this for years, and I have found a method that just gives me the control to get those tiny little stitches. We don't want big long stitches in between each grab of the fabric, because then your quilt isn't going to stay together very well. It's going to be pulled apart when we go and quilt it and stuff. So I've come to the end, I've pulled out, I've done one tiny little stitch, and I've brought my needle out right on those crosshairs of the markings that I've put in, and I'm going to do some back stitching there to secure the thread, and one more. I'm going to go through one more, and when I go through, I'll take my needle. I have a little loop here. Let me see. I have a little loop, and I'll put my needle through that loop, and then it's tied. So this one's done. And we're going to finger press this. I do not open my seams. Some people say, oh, you're supposed to open your seams. No, I'm traditional. I've learned before the opening. When you're doing machine piece work, sometimes you need to open the seams because you want to flatten things out, because you're actually sewing across and sewing down your seams. But even me, I don't open my seams. I might open some of them. So that one's ready. I'm not ironing anything. This one is going to go, yeah, this one's going to go there. And then I would pick up the next one. Normally what I do is I'll do these, then I'll do this and this. And when I finish one piece, I put it back into its place. Right now I'm working on this one. And actually, I'm going to switch these out. I'm going to put this one here because it's sewn. This one can go here. Now, I have these 4 patches. I've sewn this 4 patch, this square to this square, and this square to this square. And this is the teal. It's supposed to go like this. Okay? Now, I need these matched up, and I've ironed these, or I've finger pressed them on opposite direction to the dark. Okay, so now they're ready to go together. The first pin I'm going to put in is here. Now if you look at this, you'll see that they're touching right there, and that's what you want. And I'm going to put a pin right in the center between the crosshairs, making sure that this one and that crosshair lines up, which they do. And then I'm going to go across here to the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put the pin directly into between the lines and make sure that the one underneath is lined up with it. and then you're going to, and yes, I have a little fullness, but it's going to disappear as we sew. And I'm going to, I put another one, making sure that this line and this line is actually in the same place. So when I sew, I'm sewing right across those lines, on those lines. You want to sew on those lines. So this doesn't quite match up when I put it through, so I'm just going to move it over and make sure my markings, that crosshair, or the lines are lined up. And there we are. So now I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to put a knot in the back, in the end, and I'm going to start on one side. And again, I place the whole piece in the palm of my hand so I can hold it and control it. I bring my fingers up close to the first pin and I hold that fabric together before I pull the pin out. I don't want those fabrics to shift on me, because then when I go to sew, they're not going to be lined up, right? So I'm going to pull this pin out, put it in to my pin cushion. I've held the fabric together, and I'm going to go back down in the same hole that the pin made with my sewing needle and start sewing. Now we're going to go across to the joint, and this is how you deal with crossing over. I'm going to show you how to go from this side to this side without upsetting these seams. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that. And then now you've had the lesson on how to sew your pieces together, and then I'm going to just explain to you quickly what to do. Okay, so let's just slowly, and I'm checking the other side and I'm sewing right on that line. I have it lined up perfectly and it's coming along just fine. So I've come up to this seam allowance. So basically what I want to do is I want to pull that pin out and I want to push this out of the way, because I don't want to sew my seam allowance. I have this seam going this way, I have this seam going this way. So I'm going to sew right up, and I've held it so it doesn't get distorted or out of sync or skewed or anything. They're still lined up, the holes, and I'm going to sew right up to the stitching that comes here. There's a little knot there. I'm going to sew right up to that knot. And I'm going to look at the other side. That looks good. And then I'm going to back stitch right there a couple of times. Okay. And then I'm going to release this seam allowance. You're going to take your pin, your needle, your sewing needle, and you're going to go straight through the junction on this side and come out on the other side, right at that knot on this side. Okay, you want to tighten that up. Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to get it out of my way because I don't want to sew it down. And I'm just going to shimmy to make sure everything's lined up nicely. And I'm going to go back down into that hole and do a couple of back stitches right there. And then I'm going to go and continue sewing to the other end. Take that pin out. Continue to sew to the other end. I hold the needle behind it with the thimble on my finger, and that thimble is on this finger, where's our swearing finger, okay? And the reason why is because you need to hold the needle or with these two fingers, right? So we don't want a thimble on this finger because then you can't sew. So you just pull it through and we come straight up to where that pin is. I'm going to take that pin out and I'm going to come right up out of that hole right there, and I'm going to back stitch a couple of times, one more time so I can go through the loop, and there we are. That one's done. So those are the two pieces that you need to sew. You have to, and that goes here, that goes there, and then of course you're going to go and sew these two. So you would pick this up and sew that, and then pick this up and sew that, sew them together, and then place them back, and then pick them up to get them sewn, these two rows sewn. These become rows. So, and you do that, you pick these two up and sew these two. You do the same thing here, because you would have a teal and a teal and a white and a white, and then more. We'd have a background over here and two teals here and here, and I need to, and a background here and a background here. You would have a peach here and a background here, and then you'd have your two teals, and I still have to cut out one more background. So basically you would put everything, and when you sew two pieces together, please put them back where you picked them up. If you keep yourself organized, you are not going to end up putting or turning anything. You're going to put it right back into place. Now I'm going to show you what this looks like. Let me just pick up some stuff here and get this out of the way. Okay, I'm going to show you all my pieces here are sewn together. So there's all my pieces all sewn together, and let me just turn this around. I think it was like that. Yeah. So all my pieces are sewn together. This is what it looks like as you're working on it. Let me just move this and this. So this is what it looks like when you're working on it. Okay, it looks messy. This one's been sewn together, this one's sewn together. I would do this one, then I would do this, 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 and I would just go through it, do it in blocks, and then you will have these pieces all ready to go and sewn. So now when you go to sew these pieces together, you would pick up these two and line up your dots and sew across, making sure that you do not sew these down or sew these down. Okay, you have to move them out of the place and then put them back in. So next lesson we are going to continue working on some drafting and some stuff, but right now, the lesson before this, you've learned how to draft this block, which is a 9 patch. You've learned how to make templates, and you've learned how to do some sewing. So we're going to continue. I will probably be doing a 4 patch next time, and I hope that you are enjoying this. If you want to see more of these kind of videos, subscribe and ring the bell to get your notifications when I upload another video. So that's the lesson for today. Happy quilting, and we'll see you next time. Bye.